be here tonight. I've been excited about learning about both the artwork and all the donor advised funds and that sort of thing. I'm Melinda Silverstein and I'm on the board. And I was first introduced to Dining for Women through meeting Beth Ellen on a trip, on a Dining for Women trip to Bhutan, which was life-changing for all of us. In my real life, I've always been the executive director of a foundation for decades, and I've been retired for a few years. So I think we've introduced nearly everyone. There's a Kathleen, I don't see a photo. I don't know if she would like to introduce herself.
Hi, this is Kathleen. I'm with the Atlanta, Georgia chapter, chapter 7? I'm not sure which.
Yeah, welcome Kathleen and Linda Mahan. Would you like to?
Fort Collins, Colorado.
Great. Welcome. And Beth Andrews.
Hi, I'm from Greenville, South Carolina.
Oh, great. Wonderful. We've all been on so many Zoom calls. You probably don't need any clues, but there's the muting button at the bottom left, and probably during the presentations, I imagine Wendy will mute us all so that it can be a little clear. And one thing that's nice too, and there's gallery view if you want to see everyone, or the speaker view, whatever is you're most comfortable with. Also, it's really nice tonight. It will be taped, it will be recorded, so that if you hear some more technical things when Cheryl gives her presentation, you don't have to write everything down quickly. You'll be able to reference back to that. And as we get started, I just want to thank Wendy. We've all come to know and appreciate her so much, keeping us organized and on track. She's also always the consummate professional. Thank you, Wendy, for all that you do.
Thanks, Melinda.
So before we get into our featured presentation, we're so fortunate to have artist Deb Puretz Grove with us, who I don't know if you read about what she has so generously offered to Dining for Women. She is a very talented artist, and she approached Dining for Women with an amazing offer. She has donated 28 pieces of art to Dining for Women as an incentive to encourage larger gifts. So those donors who give 5,000 or more can choose one of those 28 exquisite pieces. And her artwork is found in 40 public and private collections. So quite a renowned artist, and including the Fogg Art Museum at Harvard, the Fine Arts Museum of Art, New York Public Library, along with many others. And she has a fascinating background. And I don't know about you all, but it seems like everyone I meet at Dining for Women has an interesting story to tell. Such a wonderful benefit of Dining for Women. She is recognized in the industry as an industry analyst and IT thought leader. Between 1982 and 2010, Deb led a market research firm in Hong Kong, founded a Silicon Valley startup, and earned a patent in social media. She has earned both an MBA and an MA in teaching English as a second language, and has visited over 40 countries. And then it says, this is interesting, she's lived as an expat for over 15 years. And perhaps when we have a time to have a larger Zoom meeting with her on December 9th, she will disclose where she has lived those 15 years. I'm sure there's many stories there. And as part of earning a certificate in nonprofit leadership, she conducted research on the impact of Dining for Women. So she's very knowledgeable about Dining for Women. And there will be a webinar on December 9th at 1 o'clock, where she will discuss her career, artwork, and her commitment to global gender equity. So Deb, can we hear about your contribution and a little bit more of why you're sharing this, your artwork with Dining for Women.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. Very, very nice welcome, Melinda. So it's 1 p.m. Eastern time on the 9th. So if you're on the coast like I am, you want to say it's at 10 a.m.
Yes.
Good. The second thing is I always used my married name during my business and career, but I use my maiden name, which is Pura. It's in my art. So I'm so sorry if this causes some confusion. It suddenly occurred to me last week that if everybody knows me as Deb Grove, you're never going to find me on the web. But behind me are some of the works that I've done. And the reason that I did this is because I've always been interested in fine arts. And I've always been interested in business and high tech and IT and the movement from movement that went from the real world to the digital world. And that's really what all my art is about, all of it. But way back in 2002, I found my ex-husband setting up 8 chairs and I said, hey, what's going on here? And he goes, oh, it's a meeting for all of these people that are in Silicon Valley that want to give and make philanthropy part of their DNA for their startup companies. And so in came Linda Alapin, who's been recognized by University Art Women, I think that's what it's called, UAW. Nationally, she won the Woman of the Year, I think, in 2018. And Linda came to that meeting back in 2003. And the reason that that's important is because Linda was the catalyst for the training that the early founders of Dining for Women took. So I knew about them years and years and years ago. And as I supported Linda Alapin's different nonprofits, I remembered Dining for Women. And when I did my own certificate in nonprofit management in 2013, I looked at the overall scope of what Dining for Women had done for women. And I pulled up my old example that as of 2009, well, it was founded in 2009, according to my notes, they had given small groups. This is my premise of what a great organization it was. But I actually wrote this in 2015. They had given they would have given small groups between then, 2013, 2009, and 2020, 200,000 women, and each would earn 50 cents per day more with the loans, or at 200 work days per year times 15 years, resulted in, get this, because I don't know how I got there, but I did the math, resulting in $150 million for the local communities around the world. And that was my attempt to do kind of a mathematical analysis of how big this was for all the communities, because they were not only in that 15 years showing what they could accomplish, but also they were letting their daughters learn from them. They were letting their sisters, extended family learn from them. And that's how big you had to look at the impact of what we were doing, of what Dining for Women was doing in the local communities. So when I decided in COVID I was going to do 100 works of art, I thought, what do I do then? What do I do with all of that art? So I decided I was going to give it away. And then when I looked at the logistics of giving it away, they were all different sizes, the ones that I did. And you can find them all on the chat. But it was easier to just have one size fits all, so that then they could all be sent at the post office with a reasonable amount of time. And that's how I decided, no, don't give away the little ones, give away the big ones. That's how we got to today. Oh, did you want to ask me anything, Melinda? You're on mute. I think you're muted.
And Melinda, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened. Well, just the process of using a silicon chip and.
So a long time ago, before chips became microscopic, they were this size. This is the size they were back in 1994, 5, and 6 when I started to think about how to do this. And then my first prints are from 1997. And what they would have done is they would have cut these chips down to size. And so I have a collection of rejects from a manufacturing company in Silicon Valley that was working with Corning glassware. And so it's a bendable reject that I have. But once you understand about printmaking and making many, many copies, you're better off if you go to copper. So then I got the drawings, the engineering drawings, and then I was able to make copper plates so that I could make longer runs, bigger runs of them. But I never made more than 25 of anything. And so what I've done in these works behind me, and that some of the ones that that you were just seeing on the screen, is I was juxtaposing this, which is a physical remnant of what computing is, with the idea of electronic copies of something versus real copies. So if I have a photograph of my grandmother, it's the real thing, and it's got her oils and touch and dust and all of that goes with that photograph. And it was when I was starting to make these that the whole idea of cloning and cloning sheep and DNA, et cetera, was coming into the fore. And also it was when the Supreme Court for the first time accepted electronic copies instead of an original and its other document and its copies. So every document that I use is always the original. So there'll be pages from the 1891 Encyclopedia Britannica, or in this one that's over here, that way, no, anyhow, the one that has a card in the middle of it, that one is a sympathy card from the 1920s. And I put it on top of an 1891 or 95, I forget, Encyclopedia Britannica index. And I figured that somebody who was on that page could have had a sympathy card like that for them when they died.
Yeah.
And then up above it, I also have records, like this is the Woodman of the World, and it's got golden stamps and everything that's underneath it. Everything that we now keep on a computer, I was trying to show were preserving things that were real. And you know, if you have 20-year-old children, 20 or 30-year-old children, they find this difficult really hard. I mean, they find this whole concept really difficult, that we used to get so much done without the computer. But these are all original old photos. They're all original map drawings. They're all old invoices, letters, photos, everything. None of that was a digital copy. This is an old book, a French book from the 1770s or something like that. And I did that as a way of saying, hey, before there was Kindle, you know, guess what there was? And
What
so
a fascinating project you've been
ones.
working on. And I'm sure folks really want to hear more, and we'll have an opportunity on December 9th at 1 o'clock Eastern time, 10 a.m. for us West Coasters. And there's also a website if you want to go. Now, what is the name of your website, Deb?
So that's also on the chat. It's purepurits.com. And then the newer works that I produced are on livefromafar.com, and you can see it on the chat.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you on the 9th.
Yes. Now we will go to our featured speaker, Cheryl Holland, who is a certified financial planner and founder of Abacus Planning Group, a holistic financial advisory firm with over 1.4 billion in assets under management. Cheryl consistently appears on top advisor lists such as Barron's Top Advisors, Barron's 100 Top Women Advisors, Financial Times 300. She is a dedicated volunteer in her professional and in her profession and community. She is a member of a Dining for Women chapter in Columbia, South Carolina. She is also a member of the Bryn Mawr College Board of Trustees and on the board of American Red Cross, Tiffany Circle Children's Trust of South Carolina, United Way of Midlands Board, and the Institute of Fiduciary Standard. This is a very busy woman. She is married with one daughter and enjoys reading, trying to count hummingbirds and weeding her herb garden. So now we'll take it away, Cheryl. We're eager to hear what presentation you have for us tonight.
Linda, thank you. And Deb, thank you. What a marvelous gift you have brought to us, and a joy to hear you talk about the creative process. That's unique to me. So, and I don't think I knew what a silicon chip looked like, or the rejected ones definitely. So welcome everyone. I'm going to share my screen because I think it's something to have a little bit of a visual, and then we will have time for chatting and questions. I'll go through these ideas, and you may have other ideas that you want to share with the group as we go along. But it is the season of giving, and I was surprised to learn last year that about a third of all gifts to philanthropic institutions come in December. So Wendy, I know you're incredibly busy right now making all of this happen, and 12% come in the last 3 days. And I started thinking about, are those reactionary gifts? Are they sort of emotional gifts? Are they thoughtful gifts? And how we might help our own clients. We try to talk about this in January, so we're making those gifts well in advance and in a timely manner, in a thoughtful manner, because I feel like when you think about your charitable giving in the context of your resources, in the context of your taxes and your long-term plan, our logo is to create abundance. And I feel like you can give more when you use all these tools at your disposal. So tonight we're going to talk about a few of them. Happy to answer questions as we go. I want to spend just a moment talking about my Dining for Women story. My business coach, Kathy Bolerud Holland, actually started a school in the border between Nepal and India. And as a part of that, she learned about Dining for Women, probably near its founding, and applied to be a grantee for her school. And she called me up and said, Cheryl, right there in your own state is this amazing group of women, Dining for Women, and I want to introduce you to them and get you started. And so I joined my local chapter in Columbia, where I have so many good friends who aren't in the business world exclusively and who care about the things I care about. And I love, like you do, learning and gathering to break bread historically, and learning together and sharing together. So I feel one of the things we know about women and giving is that we like to give together, and that's one of the unique aspects of Dining for Women. We give together, and we feel that power that we can do more together with time. I am gonna, we all think about, well, how do I give? I know the women on this call, how do I allocate my time, my treasure, my talents, and the new word I'm hearing, my ties. That's the network we all have. And so tonight I'm going to be talking specifically about our treasure, but I know that each of you does more than just the dollars from your pocket. And we'll go through some simple ideas all the way to somewhat more complex. We won't get into the more deeply complex strategies for legacy giving, but I'm happy to answer questions or give resources as we go along. So let's talk about what's new in 2020. We know that the CARES Act was passed earlier this year, and it did have some benefits for charitable giving. And the first one I'd like to talk about is something that would be appropriate to my daughter. She's 25. She has her first job in San Francisco. She's blessed not to have student loans, and she feels already the need to give back with her time and treasure. She's a person for giving $300 in cash this year. Normally she wouldn't be able to take a deduction for that, because you know how it works now in your tax return. You tackle up all the money, all the income you have, and then the deductions, if they don't total more than the standard deduction, no matter how much you give into charity, you don't get to give that on top of that standard deduction. They've made an exception this year. So if you've given $300 to Dining for Women, you get to deduct that in addition to your standard deduction. So that could be anywhere from an extra $100 boost to your bottom line, because you're going to get that tax deduction, to less depending on your tax bracket. The next is, they've also said, you know what, you can actually, if you have $100,000 of taxable income, you can deduct $100,000 of charitable giving as long as it's cash this year. It's normally 60% for cash. So that's something that my neighbor, who is extraordinarily generous, she has a portfolio that she doesn't need for her daily living expenses, and she always gives away more than she can deduct. And this year she'll be able to do all that. So cash only, you can deduct up to 100% of whatever your taxable income is for the year. If you have a corporation or you work in a corporation, this is a little known fact. They also increase the ability to deduct cash contributions for corporations up to 25% of taxable income. So a big boost this year to support charitable giving. And if you give more than that, or if you, then you can carry it forward. So what I mean by that is, let's say you have income of $100,000 and you give $150,000 to Dining for Women because you want lots of Deb's paintings. And I don't know if we get a multiple there, Deb, but you can carry forward that $50,000 that you didn't get to deduct to future offset up to 5 years. So those are just little tips. That last one is not new, but I just wanted to add that in for people who might want to know about that. Now, the next idea is sort of the gold standard of savvy giving, and that is to say, I'll give you an example. I have a client in Tennessee who, believe it or not, bought $10,000 worth of Amazon not long after it started, and she now has $30 million worth of Amazon stock. She lives very modestly, very thoughtful about how to give away, and so that's sort of an extreme example. But I'm going to give you several of people who would want to give that stock to the charity, because if I take $10,000, if I sell $10,000 of my Amazon stock, I'm going to owe and give that money to charity. I'm going to owe probably at least $2,500 in taxes, and the charity would only get $7,500. If I give $10,000 worth of stock to a charity directly, they sell it and no one ever pays the income tax liability on it. So that's why this is sort of the cornerstone of thoughtful giving for people who have more than cash in their portfolio. So the times you think about doing this is, right now the market is up. Maybe I should take a little bit of risk off the table. So you're rebalancing your portfolio back to its normal strategy. You say to yourself, do I really want to sell that stock and pay taxes that are due in April, or should I give that to a charity like Dining for Women? Another example is my client who has all this Amazon stock. Yes, it keeps going up, but maybe one day it won't. And so we want to have a strategy where we're giving away segments of that stock at all periods of time, so that she has ability to diversify into not just having Amazon. We all know what's happened to companies over time that have gone straight down the tubes. And we don't expect that to happen to Amazon, but we also want to protect our wealth for future giving too. Sometimes clients have an emotional attachment, so they don't want to give away that stock. They don't want to sell that stock because mom gave it to them, right? And then they use the dividends to buy their first prom dress. I actually know that story. And then later on it grew and they bought their first down payment of a house. So they have an emotional attachment to a stock, but it represents too much in their portfolio, or it's a risky investment. So what we will oftentimes is, let's gift, $100,000 or $1,000 of that stock. And then the cash you were going to use to give away, just use that cash to rebuy the stock. So you still own it. You've given away the low basis stock where you would have owed a lot of taxes, and you've bought it with a much higher basis. So if you ever do decide to sell it, you've given away your tax liability once again, but you get to hang on to that emotional attachment that you may have for whatever reason. In this particular case, if you give more than your income, for stock, when you're giving appreciated stock, you can only deduct 30% of your income when you're giving an appreciated asset. So if I had an income of $100,000 and I gave $100,000 of stock this year, which happens to my client, right? Because her income's not that high compared to the value of Amazon stock, she can carry $70,000 of that deduction forward for 5 more years and use that deduction. So just remember, if you want to give away more in a year of high need, you can do that, and you're not losing your tax deduction. You're just carrying it forward over time. So that's the gold standard. This next one I love because, as women, I think, especially for dining room, one thing I love about us is that we celebrate aging. We realize the gift of wisdom and maturity and abundance in our lives. So when you turn 70 and a half, you get to celebrate with a qualified charitable deduction. You may have heard the word QCD. This is for people who have retirement accounts. So first of all, to qualify, you must be 70 and a half. That's a great milestone. This is only eligible for individual retirement accounts, not SEP IRAs or simple IRAs or 401ks, but you can always take the money in those retirement accounts and roll it into your individual retirement account to allow you to give a qualified charitable deduction. What happens is you just call up your advisor or the person who has custody of your funds, like a Charles Schwab and Company or a TD Ameritrade or Wells Fargo, and say, I don't want my required distribution from my retirement account this year. I want it to go to a charity. And you can, every year, you can designate up to $100,000 of money from your retirement account to a charity. It has to be payable directly to the charity, so it will come directly to Dining for Women. I know, Wendy, we get lots of gifts like this every year. And it's a very powerful way. Now, in 2020, the government said, guess what? You don't have to take a required minimum distribution from your retirement accounts. I would encourage you to think twice about whether or not you want to skip. And you definitely, if you're going to make any charitable gifts, you probably still want to go and make a QCD from your retirement account, even though the government said you don't have to take a distribution, because giving away this year minimizes how much you're forced to take out next year. Now, you might be surprised, but if you have a retirement account and you have appreciated stock, it is almost always, after consulting with your tax advisor, better to take a qualified charitable distribution. Let me tell you why that is. I'm going to get a little wonky here, so forgive me and clarify if I don't make it clear. But when you take a qualified charitable deduction, a distribution, it goes straight from your retirement account to the charity. It never passes through your tax return. When you make a gift of appreciated securities, if you take money out of your retirement account, it's going to show up on your tax return. And when you give away long-term stock, it's going to be deducted against higher income. But the problem with that higher income is it impacts how much of your Social Security is taxed. It may impact the Medicare premiums that you pay and increase those. So you almost always want to do the qualified charitable distribution versus giving appreciated securities, although there's trade-offs where some clients would do both or do the other. So just be sure that you think about it, but we really think the qualified charitable distribution is almost, and I put deduction up there, I need to change that slide, should redistribution. It's a typo on my part. So this is a great thing to do if you're over 70 and a half, and I know Dining for Women gets lots of these gifts. Tiny little side tip before I go to our last recommendation. The simplest way to impact charity at your death is to name your retirement accounts beneficiary designations to a charity. So when I pass away, I'm not leaving my retirement accounts to my daughter or my husband. I'm leaving those to the charities I care about, because if my husband inheritance, when he turns 70 and a half, he has to take money out every year, pay taxes on it. Same thing if he were to die and goes to my daughter. If I leave everything to the charities that I care about, and all I have to do is write in their legal names and put 25%, 10%, however I want to do it, that money goes directly to them and no one ever pays income taxes on it. And you don't have to go to a lawyer. You just have to call up your broker and change that beneficiary designation to a charity. So that's not short-term giving, but it's super smart long-term giving. Now we'll go to the Cadillac. And so my mom is a perfect example of someone who does a qualified charitable distribution. Every year we sit down and mom talks about what she wants to give to church and what she wants to give to the food bank. And then we do all of that through her qualified charitable distributions. She was a school librarian, so you can imagine between her retirement plan, her 401k savings, and her Social Security, she has more income in retirement than she had when she was working as a school librarian. So she loves giving away the extra, and that's a great strategy for her to do. This final one is for individuals who the donor advised fund itself is a charity. It is a 501c3. So this was created in order to allow individuals to make a gift to a charity and then over time decide how to make grants. So you can put cash in a donor advised fund. You can put that appreciated stock in a donor advised fund. And we'll talk in a little bit the other kinds of things you might be able to put in there. But you'll look at the bottom line, and the difference between a normal gift of stock to Dining for Women and a gift to a donor advised fund is the following. When you make the gift to a donor advised fund, so you would call up your advisor, and we use Charles Schwab and Company, so it's the Charles Schwab Charitable Fund. There it's a Cheryl Holland and Doug Quackenbush family fund. That's a donor advised fund at Schwab. So I put money into that account tomorrow, I get the deduction this year. But I might decide to give away a whole lot this year because I've sold a piece of real estate or I've had a good year and I want to share what I have made that particular year. But I haven't decided how I want to give away all of it. Once I put the money in there, I get my tax deduction. I can give that money away whenever I want. The next day, 5 years from now, 2 years, a little bit next year, a whole bunch the third year. So you have the flexibility to get the tax deduction now in the wisest tax year and then give it away over time. You can also invest it in those accounts. So if you want to grow that account, just like you grow your own portfolio for retirement and give away more over time than you do immediately, you can also do that. So the beauty of the donor advised fund is you do the giving to get the tax deduction, just as if you were giving to a charity, but you give the money away over time. Oops, I did not mean to go up. So I think, so let me give you an example of something. So let me give you myself as an example. When I sell shares in Abacus to my younger generation shareholders and leaders, I put the money in in this particular case, I put it in Fidelity's charitable fund because they will take complicated assets. So I give my S Corporation shares to the donor advised fund. And then those stocks, my younger shareholders buy the stocks from my donor advised fund. I can put real estate in there. So if I had a second home or a house that I inherited or whatever kind of land that I no longer wanted, I could give that to the Fidelity Donor Advised Fund. If I am a venture capitalist and I have limited partnership shares or general partnership shares, I have clients who have oil and gas interests. All those things can go in the Fidelity Donor Advised Fund that are complicated assets that most charities don't have the savvy and nuances to handle. And then you can turn around and give it to a simpler charity who doesn't have that legal staff to support them. So a donor advised fund is for someone who either wants to give more complicated assets or who wants to make a big deduction, a big charitable contribution one year and give it away over time. So I'll close with just a couple of thoughts on this. One reason people are using donor advised funds more than ever goes back to that issue of you now have a standard deduction that unless you give more to charity that year than the standard deduction, you're not getting to deduct your charitable gifts. So we have clients do what's called bunching. So this year, we'll give 3 years worth of charitable, they'll have a plan, I want to give X amount to charity every year. We'll give 3 years worth this year to allow them to bump up and get the charitable deduction above that standard deduction, and then not make a charitable deduction the next year, but still be able to give to their college, their kids' school, the local food bank. So it's called bunching, and it's made these advised funds much more popular. The other reason they're more popular is, wow, they're so cost effective. People don't have to set up a family foundation anymore to have a long-term impact. At my house, we sit down together as a family, and it's a way for me to listen to my husband's values, my daughter's values, and we decide as a group what we'd like to give away every year. So it's a wonderful vehicle for conversations about giving for children of any age. That's another reason why I like the donor advised fund. I always love to have a call to action. So I would recommend tomorrow, I have this great resource that I got from a group called, and I put on the resources group, 2164 Next Generation Philanthropy. It's called Time, Talent, Treasure, and Ties. And I try to every day write down at least once a week, what I'm going to do with my time, talent, treasure, and ties for other people. So I would encourage all of us to think about that. I have a resource list. As I said, my mom was an elementary school librarian, so I go nowhere without a bibliography. So I have a resource list of books and websites for you all. I would encourage y'all to pick 3, besides looking at Deb's website, pick 3 things from the resource list and do exploring around giving and what women are doing together in philanthropy. Definitely consult with your own tax advisors because everybody has a unique footprint. So there's no way for me to say this is the thing to do, but here are some ideas. And then one thing I think is so powerful about Dining for Women and so powerful about the women who belong to Dining for Women is block time on your calendar in the next month, and I would say double it because it's never enough, to discuss your vision and values around philanthropy with your family or friends or friends. Those are, in this time of COVID, I think I found myself losing energy many times. And I thought, I'm just going to take flowers next door. I'm going to bake an extra chicken tonight and take it down the street. And every time I did that, that re-energized me more than exercise, more than learning, more than anything I could do. So I think I've learned, and I know you all probably already know this, that thinking about doing for others and discussing doing for others is probably the most empowering and energizing thing we can do for our brain outside of gratitude. Again, you will get the recording. Here is the list of resources that I've put, all the different charitable gift funds that are out there among the various brokers, some books, some websites that I think are intriguing. And finally, just in closing, I'm so so I feel so empowered by what Dining for Women does around the world, and that there's ever a time for all the things that we need, girl power and equality. It is now, and it's not just in the United States, but it's around the world. So thank each of you for what you're doing to make a difference there. And I'm going to stop sharing and pause and see what questions we may have.
Cheryl, there was one
Yeah,
commenter in the chat. Maybe you're seeing it.
I see that, and I will email Wendy an answer to that. I guess that's a possibility that I just don't know about.
I don't know if all of you have looked in the chat, but Pat was basically saying that
Yeah.
she talked with her financial advisor and was told that she could use a qualified charitable distribution. Now she's not 70 and a half. How did they come up with and a half? Like, why 70 and a half? Why not 70 or 71?
Well, and what's wacky is the new rules say you don't have to take money out of your retirement account until you're 72, but you can make the qualified charitable distributions at 70 and a half. So Pat, I will check on that and definitely send it to Wendy and she can get that to you.
Yeah, 70 sounds far away, but it's probably getting closer.
We all are getting closer. Tap, 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 tap. So I would love questions if you have any.
Yeah. Hey, Cheryl. Cheryl?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm not clear about the qualified charitable account out of your IRA. So I have IRAs
Yeah.
and I give directly out of that. So out of my required minimum distribution, portion of it goes out to charities.
So what you would do is they're not exactly linked, but they do. So if you, let's say you have a required minimum distribution of $50,000. If you give $50,000 directly to a or many charities, then you don't have to take your required minimum distribution. You can give more than your required minimum distribution, but no more than 100,000. And if you give less than your required distribution to a qualified charity, then you have to take the difference between your required minimum distribution and your charitable distribution as a required minimum distribution.
And so why would I set up the qualified charitable account?
So you wouldn't set up an account. All you have to do every year in January, or now, if you have not made a distribution and you want to make one this year, you don't have to this year. Remember, everybody got
Right.
passed this year.
Right.
But if you want to, if you're going to give charity, might as well give it from this account. You just call up your broker and
Right.
say, I want to make a qualified charitable distribution
Right.
to this charity. You don't have
Okay.
to set up a separate account. It goes directly from that account.
Right. Okay.
Then you get a 1099.
hmm
And on your 1099, it lists the charities that you gave to, so you don't even have to keep any records.
Oh, okay.
You get that on your 1099.
hmm But what about this qualified charitable account that you talked
You mean
about?
the donor advised fund?
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
That-
no, I get, oh, would that be different than the qualified?
That is different. So a donor advised fund, the top three I would recommend, you can set one up at Vanguard.
Uh-huh.
Very easy. You go online, go through the steps, set it up. You
Oh,
can do one at Schwab, which is the vast majority of our clients' accounts are at Schwab. Again, very easy to go online or go through advisor, set one up. And then I use Fidelity primarily for my family because I'm typically giving shares of my company, and the other funds won't take more complicated assets. So Vanguard's fantastic. It's the cheapest. Schwab is excellent and huge. And then Fidelity's the one for, and I love Fidelity's website. So just keeping abreast of trends in philanthropy, the Fidelity charitable website is really good. Really front and center information.
so you would use your cash, not your IRAs, to set that up,
Exactly right. Or your appreciated
or
stock.
securities?
Mhm.
Okay.
That's exactly what, and so the only thing about that is when you make distributions from your donor advised fund, like I have a zoo membership, right? Well, the zoo membership comes with some tickets, so I can't pay for my charitable contribution to the zoo or to a gala out of my donor advised fund because it has a personal benefit.
Okay.
The other thing you can't do is meet a pledge. So let me talk about this for just a second.
Oh, okay.
Let's say I pledged, my daughter graduated from college. We gave a scholarship in her name as her graduation gift. She didn't need any more stuff. And she had an old car that was just fine. So we wrote the language to them so it wasn't considered a pledge by the IRS, but the college knew we owed it over 5 years. And we used our donor advised fund to pay that off. So you can't really pay your church pledge, but you can give money to your church. You just can't say, I'm pledging this, and then meet the pledge with money for the donor advised fund. Now, I don't know if the IRS is ever going to come find you, but just be aware that's a technical issue. Say, Linda, take that money back that you gave the church, or we're going to make you in trouble.
Good, thanks.
Diane, you said about the $300. Yes. So this year, because of the CARES Act, when you file your tax return, you'll add up all your income, right? Adjusted gross income. Then you'll take your deductions and you'll get to take an extra $300 above the standard deduction for money given to charity. So there's a little bonus for people that don't itemize their tax deductions. So this year, go back to saving your receipts for up to $300. It's definitely something you should tell younger people about that they probably won't know about.
Okay.
So thank you all for asking clarifying questions. It's a lot of information to absorb, and it's jargon and it's technical acronyms. That's the thing about women in finance. You have to like get comfortable with people talking to you in acronyms all day long, and then translating it for your clients in human words.
So Cheryl, to set up a donor advised fund though, you can't use tax shelter like IRAs.
You
or-
cannot, that's a great question. You cannot make a qualified charitable distribution to a donor advised fund.
Okay, but you can, so if you have taxable income. okay,
Absolutely. You can write a check. Most of them have a minimum. You can transfer securities over right away. It's a very straightforward process.
So
two things
if
I go ahead.
I have Charles Schwab as
Mhm.
my financial planner, but what if I have taxable investments? Would you recommend that we just transfer the securities rather than the cash?
Absolutely, always.
Transfer the securities.
The only exception was like in 2009 when the market went down 50%. Remember that? I do. And we said that year, give cash because things were so depressed. But in most cases, you give the taxable. So all you would say to your advisors, I'd like to set up the Charles Schwab gift fund, and I'd like to transfer however many shares, whatever dollar amount you're deciding to do this year. I think there's a $5,000 minimum at Schwab. Just to open the account, not after that. One more thing to know about this year, every brokerage, every custodian in the country is working virtually. And everybody comes rushing in to do all this stuff at year end. So if you're going to open up a donor advised fund, do it quickly because it's 10 days between the day you transfer and the day you can give it away. But here's the thing not to worry about. We have clients who make last minute decisions, so we'll dial it in on the 27th. There's no way they can get all those gifts done, but what they do is backdate them to the date of the request. So the charity might not get it till January 10th if you call in on December 27th, but they will date it and make it as of December 27th for the charity's records, and you're meeting a deadline if you think that's a deadline. So just more than you want to know, but just, I don't want you to know there can be some timing headaches this time of year. So act quickly.
Can you go over what qualifies a qualified charitable deduction? Like you just have to be a 501c3?
You have to be a 501c, and typically what the custodian will do, BB&T, Wells Fargo, wherever you have your retirement account, they will verify that that is a qualified charity. So if you're like now, Schwab has a list of tens of thousands of charities, but if you're giving to your local private school and it's the first time they've ever gotten a gift, it can take a little longer for them to verify, but that it just has to be a 501c3.
Can you put your donor advisory fund in your trust?
Oh, great question. No, but you don't. So I think what you're asking me, Linda, is do you title it in your revocable trust? And
Right.
I don't think you can do that. Fidelity may allow that. Schwab doesn't. But what you can do and need to do is you can name a successor owner. So for my husband and my fund, our successor owner is our daughter. So if we were to get hit by the bus, or whatever would happen to us, there's money left in there. She steps in and gives the rest of it away. So on the form itself, you get to name who you want to step in and give the rest of the money away. But that's a great question. I'll look that up too, Linda.
Because it seems strange that if everything else is in your trust or direct beneficiary.
But it doesn't go through probate. Is that?
Yeah. Oh, it doesn't?
No, it's not considered it's not in your estate, right? You've already given it away.
Oh. I'd have to think about that.
Yeah, you've already given it away to a charity, right? And so, in reality, Schwab owns that money, not you. So you're just directing what to do with it. But ultimately, when you read the paperwork, it says we own it.
If you're doing your assets, that's not an asset for you?
I think of it as an asset, right? But it's not an asset in terms of how your estate adds up.
What if you wanted to discontinue it?
That's right.
What would happen?
You want to stop it?
Yeah.
Oh, you just give all the money in their way.
Oh, you can't take it back?
Yeah, no.
So you don't want, let's say you don't want to give anything away. You want it back.
You can't take it back. It's
Okay. All right.
once you
Okay.
take the gift, you're done. Good question. Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the only gift you can take back once you've given it is a 529, which is a whole nother presentation.
So Cheryl, would you recommend, let's say, for sake of argument, you give $10,000 away for charitable donations each year. And would you recommend to do a cash donation or use the donor advised funds? Is there a significant difference?
So I would, the decision tree, and I don't know any of the facts, so I'd have to know all the facts. But the decision tree is typically the qualified charitable distribution, because that is money that's going to come back and out and be taxed to somebody at ordinary income. And that's the thing you like the least.
Right.
Then I would give away stock and other things that when you're selling them, they're create taxable, capital gains. So those would be second. And if you are giving $10,000 a year, then I would definitely give the $30,000 in a lump to the donor advised fund, get the full deduction above the standard deduction that year, and then give $10,000 away from the donor advised fund as a strategy. And the only exception to that would be if we have a real bust of the stock market, you don't want to give away stuff that's going to recover. You just give away your cash.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, my email is, I want to just, Wendy, can you type it in for them? I'm going to give you my easy one. It's Cheryl, Cheryl. My parents were 17 when they had me, and they love Cheryl and the Mickey Mouse Club. So it's that you need it. We can all remember, most of us on this call know what that is. So Cheryl, and put APG for Abacus Planning Group, mail.com. So it's apgmail.com.
Cheryl at apg.com.
APG mail, yeah. You type it in.
Mail.
Yes.
No.
And then
Got
y'all can email me. I might not get back to you right away. It's that crazy time of year where two things are going on. It's end of year, and y'all know this. Everybody wants a little human connection. And when you've had clients who've been with you 30 years, they'll just call up with an excuse. Especially men. I'm gonna say, especially my male clients. They can't just call up and say, I need you. They have to call up and say, I have this complicated problem, and then they talk to you about all their personal worries. All right, I feel like I've spent way too much time. So Melinda, cut us off.
Well,
And
it's just,
Cheryl, I told everyone that I would send the slides around if that's okay.
Yeah, and can I change the word to, I'll change them and
Sure, and just send it back to me.
one word was wrong.
Great, thank you.
well, Cheryl, I think we could probably come up with a lot of questions on into the night, but I just want to thank you so much for your presentation. It's really fabulous. And also, we thought that maybe Renee would be on this, Renee Loesch, who gave a $25,000 challenge grant gift to Dining for Women. And so far, we've outstripped the 25,000 and 51,000 has been raised. So that is
Oh my. Oh,
They're accepting
wonderful.
gifts
Hey.
through midnight tonight. So it may be even more. And well, we're right on time, which is always a good thing. Thank you everyone for coming, and for Deb, it was wonderful to hear about your artwork, and I'm sure on December 9th we'll hear much more. And Cheryl, really wonderful presentation. So appreciative of all that you do for us. So have a good rest of your evening, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very
Wendy, I'll
much.
send you those in just a second.
Okay,
Perfect, thank you, Cheryl.
Bye,
Good night,
Melinda.
everyone.
Bye, Pat.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Bye.